If you have a furry friend and you think a toothpaste might help their overall oral health, how knowledgeable are you to the ingredients in that toothpaste? For instance, would you want neem oil in the toothpaste? Hello again, I'm Dr. Rob, and I'm accompanied by Tami, and you're listening to Dental Formulator's Playbook.
Hello. So, in my experience with all of my dogs, I've had them all my life. Perhaps the best cleaning agent is just a simple white cow bone. It's always been recommended.
Mm-hmm.
It works
Yep.
great. My dogs never had gingival recession, yet they had pearly white teeth, and all they did was chew on that bone.
Indeed, and that can work great, and I agree with that approach. Still, for those who have cats, for instance, or maybe dogs that cannot or simply don't want to chew on those bones, that may not be an option. Or you might have an animal that just has really rank breath, and it's
Yeah.
something needs to be done, and a white bone isn't going to be able to do it. And maybe the chewy toys, break away particles and stuff. Maybe that's not do enough fresh breath. So then you look for a toothpaste, right? I mean, that's what we do for our mouths, right?
So, at least let's just talk about if you're going to have a toothpaste for your pet. First, it has to be appealing. Can't imagine prying that dog or cat's mouth open and try it.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. And efficacy aside, it has to taste good. And that is
Yeah.
the number one thing. And honestly, that's the thing that even humans, we want. We want something
Yeah,
that even,
absolutely.
it has to taste good. It has to make our breath smell way better, or even mask or take away, remove. Of course it has to work. So it just makes sense. Now, personally, in my experience in working with companion animal, formulations like a spray or like a toothpaste, something like that, I prefer to use coconut oil. I think that in addition to it being a naturally
Mhm.
derived product, even though there might be some refinements, some synthetic stuff that might happen, still overall it's pretty good stuff. It's about as natural as you're going to get on a normal scale, and it has an awesome sensory appeal to the pets, like cats and dogs, especially dogs like it. And I like coconut oil because other flavors can easily be diffused into it, and it kind of carries
Mhm.
that right along with it. So the profile isn't mucked up at all. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, in order to get the flavor profile that you want, sometimes you have to use maybe some ingredients that you may not want to be promoting. We've talked about it before, like a PEG 20 or a PEG 40,
Right. Mhm.
hydrogenated, castor oil and stuff. Again, there's not anything inherently bad about that, but if you're going and saying, hey, I want to be a natural product,
Right.
kind of vendor or, brand, it's what can I use to help
Mhm.
these oil-based flavors usually diffuse? So anyway, coconut oil seems to be a good. I don't see a whole lot of them. There are some, but that's just a tidbit there, though.
Well, I would definitely agree with you. Coconut oil is pretty gentle,
Yep,
and it does kind of provide some substantivity kind of to it. But the
exactly.
question is, what is the primary oral health concern for dogs and cats? That's what everyone should be asking
They
first.
don't develop dental cavities, okay? So cavities is not going to
Okay.
be a concern. The biggest concerns are going to be gingivitis, maybe perio issues, which would also then result in, well, tooth loss. I mean, we had a stray that we homed for a while. I think
Oh.
somebody had dropped them off. I don't know when they did this. They did this in the neighborhood, and it had walked around for what, a couple weeks. It was a tuxedo cat. Tuxedo cats are probably, arguably, the best cats, hands down, for a family or for just people. I mean, they are so tolerant of stuff. They're such great protectors,
They're more like dogs, which is
and
kind of cool.
they're very affectionate too. So, that's a plug out there for anybody who's looking for a black and white cat. But we already rehomed him, but he was great, but he only had three or one fang. I think he only had one incisor,
He was
main
big.
canine, I should say, remaining, and three of them, they were like, oh my God, how is he, chowing down on stuff? But he caught chipmunks and stuff. He brought me stuff
Mm-hmm.
whenever we had him. He was my buddy. He was my pal. But yeah. So anyway, so that would be an example of
Yeah.
tooth loss there. You have a cat that only has one canine, but they're happy as a lark. Animals are amazing. Anyway, but to move on, bad breath is always going to be right up there, and then of course tartar, and that, if left unchecked, and we already know this, that can even lead to the unwhitening of teeth, right? It can
Right.
lead to some discolorations, right? Depending on what they're eating, and of course, if their teeth are even clean anyway. So that could also go into the bad breath problem. So it's just like humans. We want our
Makes
teeth
sense.
white. We want
Yep.
our breath to smell good. So it makes sense to
Yep.
just have products that essentially do the same thing.
Yes, I absolutely agree. So Good news is no caries, but there could be gingival issues like we talked about, like the
Mhm.
plaque and the tartar. So, and like us, well, when we're in our pet's face, we want them to have,
Yeah.
clean breath and those pearly whites and everything. So I was looking at several toothpastes, specifically those targeting dogs, and found one that seems very popular on Amazon, but in looking at the ingredients, it caused me a little concern. So for this episode, let's discuss this one I found, and it's described as Vet's Best Enzymatic Dog Toothpaste.
Yeah, sounds good. Similar to, to products for humans, they try to put in this enzymatic language. What does that really mean? And as you know, that is generally if you have an enzyme in there, traditionally, in what we've discussed on the
Hmm.
show, is that is usually focusing on the pellicle,
Yeah,
right? Because that's
absolutely.
where some of these chromophores and these tannins, they kind of reside maybe on some superficial layers of the teeth. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. Because as we've spoken about previously with the pellicle,
Yep.
and to some extent the very outer
Yep.
part of the enamel, that's
Absolutely.
very often where the stains are basically carried or found.
Yeah, and so what we've discussed, right, with these kinds of enzymatic approaches, papain, right?
Hmm.
Papain, bromelain, these meat tenderizers are one of the options that one can use. Obviously, we talked about some other stuff in previous episodes, including even the possibility of a piezoelectric material, but that's not an enzymatic cleaner, right? So I wonder what they're talking about here in this particular toothpaste because I don't think that bromelain or papain are used. And so we got to get down into it and try to figure out, well, what is this enzymatic action, first of all. But before we do that, whenever you said it was vet's best, that makes me cringe a little bit because oftentimes what we've seen, especially if they're dentist formulated, again, no shade out there to the dentist, but that have formulations. But if you are a vet that or even a dentist or vet who has their own formulation and you're touting it as dentist formulated or vet formulated, you better make sure that you have the right ingredients and that it actually
Yeah.
performs.
Well,
Okay. So, and oftentimes that's been the biggest concern for us in looking at, several of these products. Again, not to say that it can't happen. Of course it can happen. You can have dentist formulated, vet formulated products,
absolutely.
but
However, in our
our
experience,
experience, it gets a little, and it's not even about the product can be made perfectly. Sometimes you can even have a product made by dentists, for instance, that has the ADA seal, and that's fine. But then it comes into the marketing of it. Like if they use hydroxyapatite, there's a product I know this is kind of on a tangent here, but there's a U.S. product called well, I forget what the name brand is, but the brand is from Made by Dentists. There are two dentists and they have a brand of toothpaste. They have an ADA seal on it. They advertise it as having nano hydroxyapatite. Although the paste has hydroxyapatite, it's not nano. But you see, they're trying to,
finagle,
hydroxyapatite,
yeah,
nano. Hey, why not? We'll just blur the lines and we'll just use marketing and promotion. Don't use promotion. Use the product. If it works, show the data. Don't
yeah,
be
it's pretty
afraid of it,
easy.
and just do that. Don't try to use these parlor tricks and stuff and hope that because people don't read, like we're going to talk about in this, product, doesn't mean that you don't have a responsibility to put something great out there. If you're going to go to this much trouble, make sure you know what you're talking about and you have something that's either been evaluated or has been designed the right way, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
either
So that was definitely one of my first concerns. And looking at it when I saw that
that.
formulated.
Hey, but you never know. Again, we're going to be optimistic here. I mean, if we're looking at the reviews, it looks like what this has sold about 10,000 units in the last month
It's
at
crazy.
the time of the show here of recording this. And I think that there's over 30,000 reviews. So this is a highly visible, purchased, and reviewed product. This is why it's given us, our attention.
Have to look at it.
And besides that, we had somebody had asked us, "Hey, why don't you talk about the pet toothpaste? Because I think that could be interesting." And you know what? Honestly, there are so many out there, but this is where we're going to start. And then one of the reasons is because we're using ingredients that we haven't normally discussed previously.
Okay.
And so,
Yes,
in
exactly.
addition to, hey, being a pet toothpaste.
Yes. So
All right,
uh, clearly 10,000 plus is a ton of sales.
sure,
And
you bet.
clearly they have the reviews.
Yeah, you
So let's start with the ingredients list.
okay?
Okay. So they start with glycerin.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we already know from the other episodes, again, this is all part of the formula forensics we're doing right now. Glycerin is a humectant,
Hmm.
and sometimes it's considered to be like a mild sweetener. especially for gels, toothpaste, sprays, things like this. In this product, because it's more gel-like from what I've seen a picture of, I would imagine it has content up to 45%. But if there is in any water in this product, that glycerin content could be a lot higher. Maybe, I'm not saying as high, but almost as high as what you would get in a water-free stannous fluoride gel or toothpaste that had been traditionally made before all the innovations in stannous fluoride, stabilization, really, like the prevention of the oxidation from that stannous species that we talked about. So, is there water in this product?
Water free.
Okay, so now we're going to go up. It's going to be probably the level of the glycerin. So if anybody's out there looking, well, hey, I don't know, I'm thinking about having a product. At least 75% glycerin is probably going to be what this is. Now, that may not be, there's some wiggle room there, right? It might be higher, it might be a little bit lower, but your dominant base material is going to be glycerin, not water and not any other kind of oil based.
Some people believe that glycerin isn't safe. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, glycerin is safe, unless you're, drinking it all the time, right? Again, the dose makes the poison.
Yes.
Sourcing is going to matter, right? So glycerin can be found naturally in humans, animals, as well as plant life. And it could also be distilled from petroleum oil-based things. So I think it depends on who you're sourcing your glycerin from. So manufacturers already know that. They know who
Right.
is getting plant or animal, derived glycerins. I don't think that that's a terrible issue. So, no, glycerin's a fine. It's a natural substance. I mean, we have it in our bodies right now. So plants have it. I mean, there's, I don't know how you would call it bad if
People call
if
anything
it's
bad.
natural. Now, by processing it, maybe with all the extra synthetic steps or distillation processes,
enough.
maybe there could be some, inclusion of some, I don't know, some solvents that you don't want in the formulation. But if that's the case, again, choose a reputable supplier. They will have a certificate of analysis, and any of those kind of contaminations should honestly be quite low. I would be thinking way less than one ppm, in contamination. Maybe not. Maybe less than 100 ppm, but it's going to be low.
It's really low. Okay, well, the label claims that they use natural ingredients. So
Okay.
let's just assume it might be from a natural source.
Yep.
Okay, the next ingredient is aloe.
Aloe is an interesting one. This is an interesting agent. And, sometimes you'll see aloe extract. Sometimes you'll see the Latin version of the name aloe. You might even see aloe vera, or you might just, in this case, just see aloe, right? We don't know if this is protected. And that is a very important point. And what I mean by protected is it's going to be prone to oxidation.
Okay.
I think this is one of the reasons why immediately you don't see water in the formulation. Water-based formulations tend to corrupt certain sensitive ingredients, like stannous, for instance, and in this particular case, aloe. That might actually make their potency be that much more reduced.
Okay.
Because there's water in there, or if it's exposed to oxygen, things like this. So it's probably going to have some kind of antioxidant in there. I would be thinking that it would be. But aloe is an interesting one because that was almost considered as part of the OTC monograph, anti-plaque, anti-gingivitis monograph for human use.
Really?
It's considered to be a tier 3 ingredient. They either have tier 1 or tier 3, and tier 3 says, hey, it's promising, but we need more data.
Okay, fair enough.
In fact, it wasn't too long ago. It was probably about a year or 2 years ago anyway. I remember on Amazon seeing a product that had the labeled amount, or they had aloe vera listed as an active ingredient on the drug panel. And it is not cleared for that. Just because it's tier 3, that doesn't mean that it has clearance. Only tier 1 can get that active, drug claim, kind of privilege, if you will. But the tier 3, it might have some benefit, but boy, you better have some good data if you're putting it as a just in general for your product, especially if you're listing it as an active ingredient.
Yeah, I do recall seeing like an over-the-counter toothpaste for humans that had like 40%.
Yeah, it was something ridiculous, right? Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but that was a major improper labeling issue, and I think that they rated their label. But you know what? I just did a search for. I don't remember the actual name of the company or the brand. You put an aloe vera toothpaste on Amazon, you're going to get a million hits. I mean, good luck trying to find some of these if they're not meant to be found. I don't know if it exists, but yes, I remember. But, even if it does exist, okay, and this is interesting, Aloe vera. I remember being in Mexico, and even if if you're on vacation, holiday in the Caribbean, you'll meet somebody native to that area that swears on adding aloe to their cup of coffee or their juice
Oh,
as a
yeah.
cleanser because aloe in general can produce laxative effects. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
probably going to be a concern in this product.
Okay.
I'm just saying. I don't know, especially with certain animals can have certain, sensitivities with stomach, anyway, it's just one of those things.
So there might be cause for concern because the marketing says in large white font, like everywhere, no rinse required, safe to swallow.
Yeah, we have to be careful about that. All animals are different, right? There's going to be different sensitivities. I don't know the level. It might be 10%, it might be 0.1%. I just don't know. They're not really clear on that. They're not transparent, which is fine. They don't have to be. I mean, they're not doing anything wrong, but it would be helpful to know how much
Well,
because if
yeah.
you're having, very clear labeling, advertising, say, hey, safe to swallow, no, not a problem, then it's like, well,
Mm-mm.
how much is too much? Yeah, so I don't know.
Okay. Well, when I was kind of flipping through and everything, some reviews do describe that their animals kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
had the runs, which is not only concerning but absolutely disgusting.
yeah.
Nobody wants that for their pet. So anyway,
No, they don't. They don't.
next ingredient is pectin.
Okay, pectin. So this is an interesting gelling agent. I'm gonna refer to it as a binder, kind of a gelling agent. We've talked before about xanthan gum, maybe some
Hmm.
cellulose gums and stuff. This one's a little bit different. It doesn't come from a vegetable per se, like corn, like xanthan gum can come from, or some of these other resin-based or rosin-based, gums like,
Hmm.
like I don't know, you have well, gelling gum. I think that might be based on like peas and or some kind of legume. But you have other gums, gum acacia, things like that, that are normal binders, all of those different cellulose gums. Some of them are going to have a little bit of synthetic action to it. Pectin is from fruits.
Fruits.
Yeah, so it's going to be, you're going to get some from like, for instance, apples. Definitely
Makes
the
sense. Making
peels.
tea and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Strawberries are really rich, right, in pectins, and it's in a lot of this is within the cell walls. And so you also have citrus fruits, even like lemons and oranges, but not
Okay, yeah.
necessarily the juicy part itself. It's in the peel. It's in that part of the rind.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and so that's where some of this is going to come from. So is it natural? Yeah, I mean, can you make a synthetic analog? Probably. And are there various different pectins available out there commercially? Absolutely,
Yeah.
there is. Here, I think that they're probably adding, well, I mean, you would normally add maybe up to 1%. If you had water, the formulation, does it have water? No,
No.
and so it's going to be really thin because glycerin is pretty runny. I don't know what you're going to use to thicken it. They're trying to use pectin. I think they're going to have to use at least probably 2, 3%, might even be 5%, might even be more, but it's still pretty thin. So I'm not really sure about the level, but that would be the purpose there.
Yeah, you're definitely right because some of the reviews comment on how thin it is
Yeah, it just
and
runs right off the toothpaste.
it doesn't stay on
Yeah,
the brush or the finger. So how in the heck you're
yeah.
supposed to get
So yeah, this is going to be a non-watery, watery mess. What?
it? Okay, so the next ingredient is no, it's neem oil.
Yes, neem oil, one of your favorite ones. Oh
No.
God, we have to laugh because at one point we had indoor plants all over our house, and we hadn't appreciated the ability of some of these plants to harbor and just
But
cultivate, really, these huge cultures of these spider mites. I mean, you remember some of them, especially if they were fruit-based
yeah,
plants.
it looked like a whole bunch of
Yeah,
flies. If
it
you look
just
too close, they're
yeah. And how do you
anyway.
and how do you address that?
So neem oil,
Neem
that's what
oil.
I use to kill spider mites
Yeah,
and indoor plants.
that's
Okay.
right.
So most of these applications that I've used or found just has a very strong odor when
Yes.
in a closed-in
Yeah.
area. It's not very fun. They even though they usually use less than 1%. And it's in cleaning agents too
Yep.
because it
Yep.
definitely helps with cleaning. Um, but I know this is a potent antimicrobial, excuse
Yeah,
me.
definitely.
And based on my experience with it, I'm sure it will work well to kill microbes, but I would never put this in my pet's mouth. I wear gloves when I use this.
Yeah, I mean, this thing, neem oil isn't natural. Yeah, but there's a lot of things that are natural that you might not want to overindulge in
You
or
think?
have too much exposure and things like that. I mean, I would liken this to one of those. I mean, this is a potent antimicrobial. It's gonna have some kind of effect in the whole, oral mouth microbiome response. It's gonna, in the digestive,
System, absolutely.
there's gonna be some microbiome issues there, irritations. I mean, even if you change, people even talk about it, whether it's a cat or dog, feed it a strict diet and don't divert from that diet. As soon as you divert even a little bit from the diet, you know, there will be changes systemically that will
Absolutely.
manifest in its output, right? And then
Absolutely.
and you'll be able to tell, oh, okay, this is something that they're not used to because their flora hasn't,
Hmm.
had time to
Right.
accommodate this change in diet. So I think that that's going to be the concern there. But I think one of the biggest concerns is that this is not meant for internal use, is it?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is not inside the wounds, not inside the eyes, nose, or mouth. This is good topically for the skin, as long as you don't, again, as long as you don't have any wounds, and as well as for the coat. So,
Yeah,
that's fine.
absolutely.
This is a nice way. Sometimes people use this as like an insecticide. You can even use, neem oil as a certain pesticide sometimes, or, definitely insecticide. But there are different uses for this, but all of them should not be
Are
used
terrible.
internally, in the mouth. So for me to see that, we go back to that original point in that marketing message that says safe to swallow. No, this is appalling. And honestly, it's unsettling to me because I wouldn't want to have,
No, I'd be
my pet,
furious. Yeah, I'd
use
be
this,
furious.
so
So,
whatever.
yeah, the reviews on this product point in part to the neem oil and say it gives the dogs diarrhea. So,
I mean, maybe with neem oil alone, I don't know, but definitely, could you imagine neem oil plus aloe?
yeah, these reviews they're pretty clear. They say the pets even hate getting their teeth brushed,
Yeah.
including the pets that normally enjoy getting their teeth brushed. Don't particularly like this one. They probably know it's not going to be good
Yeah,
for
I mean,
them.
it's going to be quite strong. We noticed the odor. I don't think it's going to be good on the soft and mucosal tissues,
No,
and I don't think it's good for the flora. Okay. So I would never recommend this
no, no, absolutely, I agree.
formulation.
Like I said, when I use it, I use gloves. I hate that fact that this has neem oil in it. Full stop.
And this was what, the fourth ingredient, I think, on the listing.
Yeah.
So it's going to be up there pretty good. Now, I don't know. I hope it's not up to 2 or 3% in use, but it might be. But even so, even if it's 1% use, that's even higher than what you would find in some of your weed or some of your spider mite, fungus and
Absolutely.
and small creature.
For topical use, it's less than
It's
1%.
less than
So,
1%. So
even though, honestly, if it helps reduce bad breath and plaque and gingivitis, but it causes your dog to explode, I mean,
yeah, yeah, I don't.
consider what it's doing to its system.
Yeah, no
Y-
thanks.
anyway,
Anyway,
so
yeah,
yeah.
point made.
Okay, so don't like it all, but moving on. Next ingredient. This is a different one for us. Grapeseed extract.
Yeah, and grapeseed extract, there's several vendors that actually sell different concentrations of this. You can get it maybe pure. I don't know how effective it is. This is going to be one of those ingredients, just like aloe, where it's going to be sensitive to oxidation. It's going to be
Okay.
sensitive to the presence of water and therefore oxygen. So oxygen, well, oxidizes. Think for
Mm-hmm.
anybody out there, what does that look like, from a potency reduction? Think about if you have brand new metal that's just iron. It's just based on iron. It hasn't been treated with like zinc, like, there's no alloys or anything, but you're just going to have iron. You're going to leave it exposed in a saltwater environment or even just a watery environment. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
rust. Okay. So the how quick that happens is going to be depend on other factors, but the common theme here is that oxygen is present and so is water. And so for, you know, this kind of ingredient, this grapeseed extract, you'll normally find it embedded in like a glycerin matrix. So
Okay.
that could be a possibility. 33%, maybe 66%. I have seen interesting data on it whenever it's just in a planktonic, single species, like you just put,
Hmm. We've
you
talked about that
yes,
before.
yes, you have like your paper point or whatever, and you have your petri dish and you test, to see what the zone of inhibition of things growing around it. Again, it's not realistic to the clinical situation, it is really helpful to start and identifying, hey, potential uses, and it can help build your
Agreed.
dossier of information as
Yes,
you go to make a formula, or if you go to actually, market the endpoint product. But
absolutely.
really, you're still going to need to know what it looks like in a more realistic situation.
Absolutely. I agree. So this clearly might just kind of be fluff because of potential ingredient interactions, right?
Yeah, and I've even seen this in some of the testing that I've done previously. So we have a mixed plaque species model. We offer this as a contract services to a variety of clients. So, that's just something else that we do, right? We're not just formulators, right?
Right.
We also look at performance and we try to utilize models. Either we, kind of reinvigorate existing models or we
Hmm.
modify them. We even try to come up with other ones and say,
Hmm.
okay, well, let's adapt this and see where the industry is and then let's take a look at this. Well, I think the best case to really truly see if something is antimicrobial, first test it in a mixed species model, not just a
Yes.
simple planktonic.
Yes.
Hey, we'll put it in a petri dish against one organism in a non-dynamic environment, because these petri dish models historically and generally they're just a static thing, right? You just
Well,
put
right.
your point and you see if it grows. Some of these other dynamic models can be a little bit more reflective of what might be going on clinically. And so,
Of the 600 or so bacteria in our mouth.
yeah, right, exactly. So instead of having to do necessarily an entire clinical run, at first you could use like this kind of bridging type of study, stronger than your simple planktonic, assessment to say, hey,
Mhm.
look, do we have antimicrobial activity? But it's less expensive and maybe almost as insightful to say, hey, is this going to be really, powerful in our formulation efforts? Yeah, we love this mixed species model, man. This mixed species plaques model. Anyway, whenever I have evaluated grape seed extracts in this model, they all perform poorly. Just to let you
Well,
know.
there you
So
go. Okay. And so we're gonna go to the next ingredient.
yeah, I mean, I think one other thing that we might want to say is like how much could the grapeseed extract
Oh,
be in
yes,
the
I'm sorry.
formulation? Maybe up to 5%. And again, the reason in the history of why it would fail, because it's getting oxidized.
Right.
Or it's interacting with other ingredients, especially if it's in a water-based formulation. So I
True.
think that stuff are great take-home messages
Mm-hmm.
right now, just from that, perspective. We're talking about grapeseed extracts. We're talking about aloe vera or aloe, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Those need to be protected. If you have certain extracts coming from, like some people um, like to chew on miswak chewing sticks.
Right.
We'll probably address this in another formula
Right.
thing. There are extracts of that are in glycerin. Why are they in glycerin? Because they understand the sensitivity of their reactivity with oxygen, especially when imbued in a water-based
Okay.
environment. So,
That
yeah.
makes sense. That's
All
a
right.
great point.
Now, sorry. Now we can get
No,
into
it's a
the
great
next
point.
ingredient. Yep.
Absolutely. Oh, the next one's baking soda.
Okay, so gentle ingredient. Baking soda is going to be gentle. By the way, grapeseed extract is probably also going to be gentle unless your pet, your dog, in this particular case with this toothpaste, unless it has sensitivity to grapes. Don't
Okay.
know.
Very good
Not a
point.
normal thing. How do you know? Yeah, just rub some, grapes on its skin and then you can find out. Hey,
Not,
it's just a patch test. It's just a scratch test, right? That's what they
don't do
do.
that.
No, don't do that to your dog. No, just
Or cat.
just see
No.
if they have the runs after you, give them a
No.
dose of this Neem toothpaste. Yeah, well, this baking soda, baking sodas again, sodium bicarbonate, and it's for the purposes of pH elevation. Sometimes it can be used as a preservative, but it's also used for cleaning. Remember,
Right.
there's a certain amount of sodium bicarb that can get solubilized in water. I
Yes.
think it's at least, 10, 15, 20%. When you start getting higher than that in a water-based system, it'll be still have that kind of, dissolved baking soda, but then the rest of it's going to appear as a solid abrasive particle and stuff. Not a big deal. But in this particular case, does this formula have water?
No.
No. So I wouldn't imagine, especially if it looks runny and stuff, there's not going to be a lot in there, because for this to work effectively, it's going to need to be able to be solvated probably by the saliva. And
Makes
so,
sense.
and you don't want to have too much of this because it'll just cake, it'll caulk up, really. It'll essentially, like, I don't know, almost like create some kind of weird, like, like it'll actually look like a toothpaste, but in this particular case, it doesn't. And so we know that it doesn't have a lot of volume in
Good
there. I
point.
would say it has less than 5%, probably close to like maybe 2%, if that. And it's
Okay.
in there to help balance the acidic part of
Pectin.
pectin. So
Right.
that's what it would be there for. So
Which makes sense.
yeah, which makes sense. Okay,
Okay.
cool.
Next ingredient. Okay. This is an interesting one. Glucose oxidase. And they have enzymes in parentheses.
Yeah, so this is an interesting point. So glucose oxidase, we have not talked about this
Mm-mm.
before. This is a pretty popular enzyme. And why? Because it oxidizes glucose. So you might even see some of these enzymes in certain maybe blood sugar tests,
Okay.
potentially. But this is the kind of action that is going to be useful maybe if the dog is exposed to sugar, but does the dog have issues with cavities?
No.
No, so I don't
And
think,
people usually don't feed their dogs sugar.
yeah, so I don't think it's in there for this purpose. So this is what's
Mm-mm.
really interesting. The oxidase, while it may have some potential pellicle reducing effects, this is meant to attack sugar, not
Yeah.
proteins. So there's a fundamental difference between those, right? I mean,
Well, yeah.
with the proteins, they're composed of amino acids. Amino acids have, yes, they have carbon, yes, they have oxygen and hydrogen, just like the sugar molecules do. But the amino acids also have nitrogen, and so that's not what sugars have. So I just don't think that this is a type of protein that is going to be useful because that's what these oxidases are. These enzymes are generally protein based. I don't think it's going to be useful in removing the pellicle layer. I don't think it's going to be
Okay.
useful. I think it's going to have another purpose here. And we've been talking about it this entire time. Aloe vera, the grapeseed extract, those are sensitive to oxidation.
Yes.
So I think that you can use this ingredient. You have to keep the level low because it's kind of expensive, relative to glycerin or something. So you want to use this to inhibit premature oxidation,
Okay.
and especially if it's in a water-free environment. I'm not saying that, again, it doesn't have any other potential pellicle removal and then therefore whitening benefits. I think those whitening benefits could come from these other ingredients that are also being used, like baking soda is probably going to help clean
Mm-hmm.
that. If you're, the neem oil might even be having a certain benefit. We don't know the loading level.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the oxidase is having some of the benefit, but that's where that's probably coming from.
Okay. So you say that it's maybe used to help prevent that oxidation. Would
Yep.
this be during the manufacturing process or
Well,
while
yeah, no,
use from the tube?
that's a great question. So oftentimes manufacturers will have nice, enclosed, sealed systems. They're not open. They might even have a vacuum apparatus, attached to the mixing
Mm-hmm.
vessels and stuff, and they can, basically extract out any vapors and stuff. This is especially helpful if surfactants are used. And thus far, haven't seen any surfactants listed in this toothpaste, which I think is fine. Because there's no surfactants, you're not going to get a lot of the bubbles that
Right.
would be produced during the mixing process. And so here, I don't think, that's what they're concerned mostly about. I think that they're concerned mostly whenever the tube is opened.
Okay.
Because once it becomes opened and
Expose it to
you
oxygen.
expose it to oxygen, oxygen can diffuse from the atmosphere and into the tube, especially if the cap is left open for a long enough period of time. Now, over a period of time, you're going to use up all your oxidase and trying to combat that. So I don't
There's
know.
only so much there.
Yeah, there's only so much there. I think it'll probably be fine. I think that this ingredient then is used for antioxidant purposes, and it's probably acting as almost like an oxygen scavenger. And and again, I could be wrong. I don't know. I didn't formulate it, but I also wouldn't formulate a product with neem oil in it and give it to dogs and say it's safe. So, I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
could be wrong, but that's fine.
So you just think this is used as a preservative slash antioxidant then?
Yeah, and most of your fruits and vegetables, just like even like a leaf from or some kind of stalk on like a blade of grass and stuff, everything has all of these different enzymes, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this is just one type of enzyme, this glucose oxidase. We have that in our bodies, right? And this is something that you could easily visualize if you like had a sweet potato. I used to do this as a demonstration for some of my students for chemistry lab experiments and stuff and things. You would show, you just, freshly cut open the sweet potato, you can pour some hydrogen peroxide on there. It'll bubble up because you have scavengers in there. You have enzymes in there that are meant to attack the hydrogen peroxide because that's also considered in the body something you don't want, right?
Okay.
That is something that
Yeah.
those are those bad, free radicals and stuff that are
Yes.
gonna, that are going to do some damage. But after a period of about 45 minutes, if you were to cut that sweet potato and leave it open to air, after 45 minutes, whatever enzymes that were going to do the action to reduce the hydrogen peroxide, if the hydrogen peroxide were to be applied, it's going to be low to nothing because oxygen from the air
Okay.
is already reacting and reducing the potency of those enzymes. And
Okay.
so if you were to put
Yep.
hydrogen peroxide, it's going to bubble very little until it doesn't at all. So again, there's always a shelf life with all of
Right.
these enzymes. And sometimes, I mean, this one isn't so bad. We will talk about others,
Mm-hmm.
that have even different types of enzymes
Mm-hmm.
that are actually, pretty potent, but if the system has water and we don't know how it's made, and then of course, if you're already opening it up to use
Mm-hmm.
it for your dog or whatever, how effective really are those enzymes over time,
Mm-hmm.
right? These are just
Yes.
things that are going to degrade it. I think that, this product would actually be not bad if it wasn't for the neem oil. I think that to me, that's the biggest one. And maybe the aloe vera. Again, we don't know the level, but there's where I have the concerns. Number one, the neem oil. It's a no-go for me.
Absolutely.
And number two, I need to know what that level of aloe is because it might be contributing to whatever output that the dog is
No,
producing.
that's not
And you want to check that out, right? You don't want to
not
have your
good. You
yeah.
don't want your doggy
No.
having bad things. Okay, so you think that the oxidase is probably going to protect the aloe and the grapeseed,
Yep,
basically
absolutely.
prevent it. Okay.
Yep.
So the final ingredient is quote unquote natural flavors.
Yeah, this is going to be another one. I think that they're going to try to use, the least amount of synthetics or additives, right? Adjuvants that you might want to put into the flavor system. Remember, flavor systems can comprise alcohol,
Everything.
any one of these things, parabens, sorbates, benzyl alcohol, including benzyl alcohol. That's another preservative, right? Citric acid, all
Hmm.
these things. We're not saying that it has that, but we don't know what it is. So if it was like an extract from banana or something, like there's certain houses that do pretty good with identifying or achieving a nice, flavor from a given fruit, whether that's like a
Yeah.
grape or strawberry. Heck, I've even used a vanilla based
Yeah.
extract, done in MCT, medium chain
Mm-hmm.
triglyceride, coconut oil. Mentioned coconut oil,
Hmm.
before. Coconut oil is great. Usually terpenes are used,
Okay.
with a
Yes.
lot of these flavor systems. If you don't use a terpene, then you're going to have to use a lot more of that flavor component because the terpenes help you use a little flavor because
Okay.
it's so potent. It's just such a
Makes
rich,
sense.
it just brings out the
Yep.
flavors so much better than a non-terpene based system or a non-alcohol based system.
Okay.
So oftentimes flavors have terpenes or alcohols because it really helps make the flavor
Okay.
pop. So
Makes sense.
so who knows?
Okay. So other than the fact that, you know, they use neem oil and they can't stand that
Yeah,
because
we're harping
I
on this because I just think it's
don't
unsafe. Yeah.
want to touch my skin, let alone ingest it. So anything else regarding this product that we
Well,
need to know
and
about?
we have to harp a little bit on the neem oil because on in the Amazon listing, so people go to the Amazon listing, they'll be able to find this and look for themselves. They'll say that they changed their packaging. They've changed their what is appearing on the label of the tube. So on the original tube, it actually had on there kind of prominently, and it's the biggest difference between the old version and the new version of the label. The old
Uh-oh.
version, you know, didn't have this, but now the new version does. It says new look, same great product. So it makes you wonder why, what language on that old version did they remove? Well, we know this because they show what the older label is.
What's that?
And so, well, what it was made with neem oil and enzymes.
So that's what they choose to remove, but they kept the formula the same.
Yeah, so everything else is the same. So same great product, that's what they're advertising. So I would have to ask you a question. Why would you remove made with neem oil? You're not making any claims about neem oil, right? You're not saying
Yeah,
that
you're
it's
decreasing
killing 99. Yeah,
transparency.
you're decreasing transparency because there's obviously a sensitivity that they've identified, whether that's in the reviews, whether that's in their own
Absolutely.
experiences, whether they had feedback from somebody
Maybe
else.
they should have taken it out,
Maybe
not
they,
just changed their label.
so that's what they did. So it's not prominently mentioned in like the title of the product and some of those major core search words. It's not on the label.
So they removed it completely,
Well, it's
except for those one little picture you could might be able to find their old product.
well, no, yeah. I mean, but it's still on the ingredient list.
Yes, no, absolutely. But as far
Right.
as marketing
Oh
perspective,
yeah.
then they
Yeah,
removed
they
that
try not
language.
to, yeah, they're trying not
Hmm.
to draw too much attention. And some of the other images, if I can remember looking at them, they do say that it has neem oil, but again, you have to kind of toggle through. It's not on the front of the tube, very, unlikely it is that many people will read all of the labels, especially if they're tinier. But maybe
Hmm.
they do, who knows? But I think that also maybe some buyers of this, they may not understand the sensitivities of aloe, for instance, and neem oil to a dog's digestive system
Absolutely. No,
or a
I agree
cat
with
system.
that.
So
Yeah. So now people won't even know, basically, if this is the first time they're using this product.
unless they're looking at the ingredients, yeah, but they have to look, yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So protect your fur babies and make
yep.
sure you're reading all of the ingredients. So, in other words, the transparency is really gone because they're not marketing it anymore and it's not in the name.
Yeah, I mean, and it does have an attractive price point. It's less than $10 typically, and there's been a lot of movement with this per month in terms of units sold, so it's selling well.
Yeah. Well, we discussed this previously. Just because it sells well doesn't mean, oh, I don't know, it's effective or safe.
Yeah, safe is the biggest
Yeah.
thing.
Plus, it's really thin. There's really not much to it. I absolutely would not recommend this product.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. So from a formulation, perspective, try to avoid these kinds of things, especially if it's going to be ingested, because what if somebody says, hey, they give their kid the toothpaste to feed
Yeah.
the dog and say, hey, can you do this to keep both the kid and the dog busy, or whatever. I don't know, or somebody new or somebody is unfamiliar.
It's
What
like some
happens?
for you, some for me.
Yeah, what happens if they're
Yeah.
having what happens if they deliver too much toothpaste to that dog or you're right, themselves?
Yeah. Kids get
So
curious.
I would hesitate to put this into products for human use. I would absolutely stay away from this
No, I
for
absolutely
animals
agree.
use. Nope,
Absolutely.
no way. Nope. So, all right. Well, I think we're out of time for this episode with this particular product. We do have other products that we'll be talking about, but
Okay.
I think it was really good that we talked about a little bit here. Grapeseed. We talked a little bit about the aloe, maybe the glucose oxidase,
Yeah, those are
and
all
of
new.
course neem oil. There's another product I know we're going to be talking about, and it has triclosan in it. And it's from a company who probably should know better. It's not Colgate, but it is for pet toothpaste, and it's sold by Church and Dwight.
Wait, triclosan, you said it was
It
banned,
was banned from a lot of like hand soaps and stuff, and yeah, but not. But I guess you can use it
but I
in some
guess you can
pet
use it
products.
for pets.
I don't know. Yeah, and that's Arm& Hammer. Arm& Hammer they have several different
Not
brands
good.
for dogs and cats, and
Mm,
that's one of them. It's available on Amazon, so anybody can check it
great.
out. But we will be addressing some of that. There are some great formulations out there. There are some
We need
that
to cover
are
those
that are
too.
specious too, and we need to talk about that
Hmm.
because we have to know we just have to share that kind of information. I mean,
Yeah.
otherwise, how will you know what is being done? And oftentimes, even though it might be formulated, this is just another take home, doesn't mean that it's been put through the rigorous, testing
Right.
that's needed. I
Absolutely.
mean, look at many products out there for OTC that haven't even been done. We're talking even whitening. But if you look at what the committee for the National Advertising Division is telling you, they're saying for your end product, test your final product, and you need to have scientific proof of that end product, that final product, not an ingredient, but the final product, even if you're talking about a cosmetic claim like whitening. All right.
Yes, and at the very least, safety.
Yeah, and at very least safety. All right. So again, that's it for now. We'll be talking more about these products, and we appreciate you for listening. If you have any comments, reach out. Please do. We've been getting quite a bit of feedback, and that's been really helpful. And so we'll try to address certain requests as we can. But in the
Absolutely.
meantime, thank you for listening. I'm Dr. Rob and alongside Tami, and you're listening to Dental Formulator's Playbook. Stay curious and keep smiling.